We're going to begin with the tributes pouring in for Eddie Van Halen. The rock and roll icon erupted onto the world stage who would redefine guitar playing for generations, becoming one of the most influential musicians.
The Eddie Van Halen mystery, finally solved and isn't good. Eddie Van Halen was born on January 26, 1955, in Nijmegen, Netherlands. His father was a struggling musician, and his mother cleaned homes to make ends meet. But even as a kid, Eddie heard things others didn't. By the time he was 12, he was sneaking into his brother Alex's drum kit, then he found the guitar, and that changed everything. He wasn't just good, he was obsessive.
A guitar prodigy, Eddie Van Halen became a rock god with all of the excess that implied.
Teachers said he was quiet and intense, always lost in thought. But this wasn't just talent, it was compulsion. And behind it all was a strict household, a volatile father, and a growing need to escape. That hunger made him a legend, but it also left scars.
It seemed like half the bands in America had a guitarist who thought they were Eddie Van Halen, but there was only one Eddie.
And as the band blew up in the late 70s, the cracks in Eddie's foundation began to grow. Eddie Van Halen lit up every stage he touched. Fans saw a grinning guitar wizard, a rock star with endless energy. But behind the curtain, it was a different story. Eddie battled demons for decades, long before anyone knew. The drinking started early and never really stopped. People close to him said he'd disappear for days in his home studio with bottles and guitars. He wasn't partying. He was hiding. His marriage to actress Valerie Bertinelli fell apart under the weight of it all. She later admitted they were living separate lives, even when they shared the same house. And inside the band, it wasn't better. Eddie clashed with David Lee Roth constantly. They fought over music, money, and control. The band was breaking records on the charts, but behind the scenes, it was chaos. Eddie would lock himself away, recording obsessively, chasing sounds no one else could hear. He barely slept. People say he smiled to keep the questions away, but under that grin was a man unraveling, and no one knew just how far it would go. In 1982, Eddie Van Halen made a move that turned heads across the entire music world. It was fast, unexpected, and done completely in secret. One afternoon, he showed up at a recording studio, not for a Van Halen track, but for a pop song. The artist was Michael Jackson, and the track was Beat It. At the time, Michael was already huge, but this track would take things into the stratosphere. He played it in just a few takes. He didn't ask for credit. He did it for free, just because he liked the track. But that decision came with consequences. Eddie's bandmates felt betrayed, not because he played on the track, but because he didn't tell them. The backlash inside the band was immediate. David Lee Roth was already on shaky terms with Eddie, and this added fuel to the fire. They were supposed to be a united front, the biggest rock act in the world, and now their guitarist had just boosted a pop icon behind their backs. It wasn't just about ego, it was about control. But that's just the surface. What most people don't realize is how that single session pulled Eddie into an entirely different world, one far beyond rock clubs and stadium tours. Michael Jackson's inner circle wasn't like anything Eddie had seen. It was corporate. It was powerful. For a moment, Eddie had stepped into a machine that ran on secrets, and he didn't like it. Some insiders say Eddie was never the same after that. He started distancing himself from major industry events. People around him noticed the change. He seemed more cautious, more distracted. He built a studio in his home, not just to create, but to control the space around him. A reunion built on uneasy ground. When Van Halen announced a reunion with David Lee Roth in 2007, the music world exploded. This was the dream, Eddie and Dave back together after years of bitterness and silence. But what fans didn't know was just how close the reunion came to falling apart. The tour was delayed multiple times, and there was growing tension behind the scenes. Rehearsals were tense. Roth and Eddie hadn't truly spoken in years. When they did talk, it turned into shouting. People close to the band said the chemistry was gone. Roth wanted to run the show like it was still 1984. Eddie wanted total control, and that control came with one major change that shocked fans. He replaced original bassist Michael Anthony with his 16-year-old son, Wolfgang. For the first time in Van Halen history, one of the original core members was out, and no one had a clear explanation. Michael Anthony later said he was never even even asked to rejoin. Some fans called it a betrayal. Others saw it as Eddie trying to protect his legacy by bringing family into the fold. But many industry insiders saw something else. Eddie was tightening his circle. Wolfgang wasn't just his son. He was someone Eddie trusted completely, someone who wouldn't challenge him. At the time, Eddie's health was a growing concern. He looked thinner, more fragile. His energy on stage came in flashes, but off stage, he barely spoke. Some nights, he didn't come out for sound check. He shuffled on stage, and yet he still ripped solos with the same fire he always had. It was like two different people, one that the world could still cheer for, and one slowly disappearing behind the scenes. The reunion tour went forward, but something was clearly off. Roth cracked jokes that didn't land. The smiles looked forced, and Eddie, normally playful, wild, and unpredictable, was suddenly quiet. Rumors swirled about arguments, health scares, and last-minute cancellations that never made the headlines. Still, the reunion made money. That alone kept it going. But the soul of the band, the wild spark that made Van Halen feel like danger and fun in one explosion, was gone. And the more Eddie kept to himself, the more it felt like something bigger was being covered up. But fans were starting to feel it. And the real story? It was still locked behind Wolfgang's silence. After the reunion tour, Eddie vanished. From 2015 to 2019, he disappeared from public life. Fans were left wondering, where did he go? At first, the silence was blamed on health. He'd battled cancer before. People assumed he was recovering quietly, but then the rumors started. Some said he was in rehab, off the grid entirely. The truth? No one really knew. His team stayed quiet. His son Wolfgang gave vague updates that raised more questions than answers. Whispers grew louder. Was he sick? Was he hiding something? The questions piled up, and the longer Eddie stayed hidden, the more it felt like something bigger was going on, something no one was willing to explain. When the news broke on October 6, 2020, it hit like a shockwave. Eddie Van Halen was gone. Fans mourned around the world. Tributes poured in from every corner of the music industry. Insiders say the decline was sudden. One day he was planning a project, the next he was gone. Even the cause of death got twisted. Some outlets reported a stroke. Others said lung cancer. Then it was revealed he had tumors in his brain. The story kept changing. People who had worked with Eddie for decades said they had no idea how sick he really was. Some didn't even know he was ill at all. Fans wanted answers, but all they got was a polished statement and a few quiet tributes. After Eddie's death, the silence got even louder. And for a man who lived in his studio, Eddie had hundreds of hours of unreleased recordings. Whispers started almost immediately. People in the industry claimed there were legal roadblocks. Others said the tapes were locked down by the family. But a few voices, people who had been in Eddie's inner circle, hinted at something stranger. They said Eddie didn't trust the people around him in those final years, that he was hiding things. He was known to be paranoid about control. Some believe he kept the best material hidden on purpose, not because he wasn't proud of it, but because he didn't want it to be sold out after he was gone. There were also rumors of private hard drives, encrypted files, and notebooks Eddie kept away from everyone, even his closest bandmates. To this day, nothing from those vaults has been released, and every time fans ask about it, they're met with vague answers. Some say it's Wolfgang protecting his father's legacy. Others think it's something deeper, that what Eddie left behind wasn't just music, but information he didn't want falling into the wrong hands. And now, those tapes are out of reach, stored, sealed, or maybe even erased. The warning no one took seriously. Wolfgang Van Halen was closer to Eddie than anyone. He played in the band, traveled with him, worked side by side in the studio. He saw what the public didn't. But after Eddie's death, something changed. Instead of continuing the Van Halen legacy, Wolfgang walked away from it completely. He launched his own solo project, Mammoth WVH, and made it clear he wasn't interested in reuniting the band, releasing the vault, or turning Eddie's work into a tribute act. Some say he's grieving, others say he's protecting his father's wishes. But a few insiders believe there's more going on. They claim Wolfgang may have found things Eddie didn't want the world to see: unfinished songs, private recordings, or even legal battles buried inside old contracts. There's also the question of pressure. The industry wanted more Van Halen, more shows, more reissues, more cash. But Wolfgang turned it all down. No reunion tours, no anniversary specials, nothing, just silence. Almost like he knew something the rest of us didn't. Almost like he was warned. Wolfgang's silence doesn't just protect Eddie's music, It protects the mystery, and as long as that vault stays closed, no one really knows what Eddie left behind or why it's being kept out of sight. Not long after Eddie passed, a former technician who had worked closely with him for years came forward with something strange. He claimed that weeks before Eddie's death, there was a private conversation. Eddie had told him not to trust certain people around him, that something didn't feel right, that he was being watched, or maybe handled. At the time, the tech thought it was just paranoia. Eddie had always been a bit guarded, but after everything, the vault's seal, the silence from Wolfgang, the sudden end, it started to feel different. This same source claimed Eddie had pulled several tapes from his studio in the months before he died. Not just music, but audio logs, notes, possibly even recordings of meetings. He hinted that Eddie was worried about more than just legacy, that he was trying to protect something or expose something and ran out of time. None of this has been confirmed, but it lines up with the way Eddie lived those final years. Isolated, secretive, tightly controlling everything he created. Now, that technician's claims are raising new questions. Was Eddie sitting on something bigger than music? Did he know something about the industry? About the people he once trusted that pushed him into hiding? And if so, what was he planning to do with it? The answers may be out there, but they're buried deep. And unless someone opens that door, they might stay buried forever. Share your thoughts on Eddie Van Halen's legacy in the comments below. And if you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for further updates.